Merrimack School District Budget Committee will come to order. If you could all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And I would like to ask our newest member, Lori Peters, if she would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, I'd like to apologize for the extreme heat in here. We were assured in the work order that we would have air conditioning, and somewhere along the line, the best we can do is the fans that are up there. We've been trying to contact the maintenance department and have the situation rectified, but it's just one of the unintended consequences that usually crop up sometimes. So I ask your forbearance with that. I tell you right now, I am just as hot as anybody else that's in here this evening. The second item of housekeeping is last year we had some difficulty with our school district budget committee website. I'm not much of an IT tech myself, but apparently for some reason or another, people from various accounts weren't necessarily able to connect through to the municipal budget committee account on the district site. We thought we had that solved. This year again, we seem to have a little problem that's cropping up. There's been a couple of individuals that have not been able to contact us, and I assure you it is a technicality. The fix by the IT department in the school district is to have a relay, and so it should pop up as a relay, and you can, it gives direct information relative to how you then cancel out that relay and actually connect with the person that you want. And apparently that's the best they can do until they have an overhaul of some kind at the school district. So again, I apologize for anybody that wasn't able to contact people on the budget committee through, excuse me, Pat, yes.
If I can, Chuck.
Yes.
They did some further research, and I have been talking with them all day today. It seems
Closer to the mic.
It seems that the problem is that AOL and Yahoo do not allow emails to be forwarded to a distribution list, which is the budget committee list of 15 names. So it is that was the problem, not anything internal with our email. And they've come up with a workaround to make this work for us. Everybody else that emails anybody else in the district or using the SAU 26 email gets it. But because ours is a distribution list to everybody on the budget committee, AOL and Yahoo are the ones that are presenting the problem, which is why people that have AOL or Yahoo emails were getting the emails, which is what we discovered last year. So they've come up with a workaround, and come January we'll see that it probably will. Maybe there'll be something else different, but right now that's the best solution and the easiest for all of us.
Thank you very much for that clarification, Pat. And in any event, anytime anybody needs to get hold of the budget committee, I accept calls and emails. I have no difficulty with my private email being out in the public. It's charles.mower@gmail.com, and my phone number is and has been for a number of years 424-1200. And I encourage anybody that wants to know anything about the Budget Committee to give me a call. Thank you. Now, our first order of business is the minutes of our last meeting for approval. So, if I could have a motion on the minutes for approval.
I would vote to approve the minutes.
Second. All right, it's open for discussion. Yes, Carol?
Yeah, I just have one typo type correction. Let me just find it. Sometimes gloves are not the best. Okay, on the bottom of page...
Close to the microphone, Carol. Thank you.
All right, about 2/3 of the way down the first page, in the paragraph that starts with Seymour told the committee, towards the end of that, it says, a proposed budget, the word which should be inserted to make that sentence make sense or be grammatically correct. Oops, sorry.
Are there any other comments on the budget meeting minutes? Seeing none, call for a vote. All those in the affirmative, raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. For the record, Carol has abstained. All right. Okay. Now, the purpose of our next order of business, and the primary purpose for which we're here this evening, is to fill the vacancies that exist on the Budget Committee. We have 6 candidates that have applied, and I would like to inform you all of the procedure that we will be using before we begin. All candidates will have an opportunity to speak to the board, give us some idea of who you are and why you're interested and what you think your qualifications may be, and make your very best pitch for becoming a participant in the Budget Committee activities. After all the candidates are interviewed, we will be putting all candidates into nomination, and then the board will deliberate relative to the strengths and weaknesses that you may believe exists in any given candidate. After the deliberation, we'll be calling for a vote, and each board member gets 2 votes, or I should say up to 2 votes. You do not have to vote. You can vote for 1. You can abstain. You can vote for 1 and abstain. You can vote for 2, but no more than 2 votes for the candidate that you feel would best occupy the position. And then we'll be calling for the vote, and the candidates that receive the most votes will be appointed to the Budget Committee. Are there any questions? Yes, Carol.
It doesn't make a big difference to me either way, but I was under the impression from the prior meeting that we were going to interview tonight and vote at a subsequent meeting. So has that changed?
Well, that was the general idea in the previous meeting, but we had scheduling difficulties, and due to the number of candidates that had applied, we felt that it was important to adjudicate the situation in one meeting and simply complete the process. All right. And I'll be taking the interview for the candidates in alphabetical order. And so the first candidate we'll be hearing from is Mr. Scott Adler. Would you please come up to the microphone and introduce yourself.
Good evening. My name is Scott Adler. I am a Merrimack resident living at 3 Deerwood Drive. Did everybody get one? That was quick. Okay.
Proceed, please.
Say again?
Proceed, please.
Oh, thank you. So I've got children in the Merrimack School District that have either graduated or attending or going to attend. I've got a 20-year-old son that is New Hampshire Army National Guard. I have a 16-year-old daughter in the high school, and I have a 3-year-old and a 12-day-old that, thank goodness, is with us today because he was on life support for a couple days. I have 12 years of post-secondary education experience as an administrator, where I was tasked with building and maintaining a $350 million budget across multiple campuses. I've got over 25 years of contract and negotiation review, negotiation experience. I am past president of 2 different homeowners associations with over 950 homes. In that particular role, I oversaw budgeting, board meetings, spending, vendor selection, contract review and negotiation, and communication to the homeowners. Currently, I'm employed as a sales manager for an HVAC distribution company, and I have a responsibility for a $94 million budget. And I'm passionate for improving our children's education and for achieving efficient and effective change. The biggest reason that I want to join the Budget Committee, besides giving back to the community, is I want to examine where the money is going. I know that I have questions, and I've been vocal about that, but the best way for me to get those questions answered is to see it with my own 2 eyes. I also am looking to help weather what I'm going to consider to be an expected economic downturn. It's coming, unfortunately, and there will be fallout that's inevitable. And to help contribute to improving the education that the children of Merrimack receive. I think there's great opportunity there. So I welcome any questions.
Pleasure of the board. Yes, Carol.
The experience you listed, post-secondary education and then also the homeowners associations, was that experience in New Hampshire, Merrimack, elsewhere?
No, it was elsewhere. It's when I lived out west in Nevada.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Go ahead.
Are you currently an admin or an active participant on any local Facebook or social media groups in town?
Yes, I am.
How do you balance that with your role if you were elected to this committee?
So if I were elected to the committee, so there's been a couple of changes within these groups that no longer solely rely on me as the sole person to make decisions or changes. It's now a committee of people. So I would balance it out by saying that confidential information would stay confidential within the committee, and anything that's public would go out. But I also know that one of the things that I'm most one of the things that I think that I can lend is the ability to educate homeowners and property owners, taxpayers, if you will, with the process, the things that I learn throughout the process. So things that go on within the meetings, things that go on within the budget can easily be relayed as questions are being asked. So right now, as it stands, I have felt, this is my own personal feeling, that there has been much opportunity to have a lot of questions answered, but it hasn't been a clear process. So one of my roles is to educate people, and that's what I enjoy doing.
Would you be starting a new group?
Would I be starting a new group?
Yeah.
A new group of what?
Of folks that are interested in what you have to say?
For the Budget Committee? No.
What happens if you're not elected?
I continue my mission. My mission continues no matter what it is I do. Whether I'm elected or whether I'm not, I'm going to continue the mission to better Merrimack.
It's good to know. Thank you.
Yep.
Dan?
I appreciate it.
I can't hear you.
It's not working? Try again. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
I'm sorry. Thank you for coming. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
We've not ever met, is that correct?
We met on Election Day.
We met where?
At Election Day?
Not to my knowledge.
Yeah,
but-
you were sitting right outside here. I came over to deliver Andy
so
Hunter
we-
some stuff,
we,
and
we sat in an
yeah,
area that's
you were
not
sitting in the
safe.
shade, and I admired that. It was hot.
What's the number one issue facing the Budget Committee this year?
The number one issue is going to for this year is going to be the potential downturn in economics that are going to be coming. In my opinion, that's the number one issue.
Okay. All right. Now, you made some disparaging remarks about me on social media, and that I don't care about. But I think it lends itself to your decision-making. How did you arrive at that if we have never met?
So I'll say this. That was an election, and what was said during the election and done during the election is during the election.
So that's different than your decision-making as a member of this committee?
Absolutely.
I'm not sure I understand that, but okay. Nothing else.
Jenna?
Hi.
Hi.
So, as a parent, it's really important to me, and I think this won't come as a surprise to you, that the people that serve our school district are involved in our school district, that they know that whatever decisions are made, they know what the ramifications of those decisions are going to be. So, my question to you is, how, outside of attending school board meetings, having kids in school and, budget committee meetings, how are you involved in the Merrimack School District and the things that go on within the district? What other ways are you involved?
So I'll say that I'm probably equal to the rest of the candidates with there are no other ways. Right now, it's just being involved in trying to understand what's going on, where the money is going, what decisions are being made, and what needs to happen.
Okay. How long have you lived in Merrimack?
5 years.
Okay,
Andy?
sorry.
So just a heads up, I'm going to ask the same question for all 6 candidates. So you're on the shorter end of the stick here. So how do you view the relationship between your role on the Budget Committee and the school board? How do you think the role between the Budget Committee and the school board, how do you view that?
How do I view the Budget Committee and the school board, the relationship together? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
I think that there's an opportunity to bridge a gap. I think there's a gap between the Budget Committee and the school board from what I've seen. And I think there's an opportunity to bridge that gap. I think that there is a great liaison here that sits, with you or Brandy that sits through these meetings. And I personally, as a taxpayer, would love to see a liaison from the Budget Committee sit in on the board meetings.
Gillian?
Hey, Andy. No, Scott. Scott. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
I've been called worse.
You know what? I'm sitting in front of Andy. I work overnights. I'm sorry. Scott, thank you for coming out and, sitting in front of all of us. As you probably know, we are the only school budget committee in the state. What exactly do you think that this committee does?
The school budget committee has what I would call final say-so on the final dollar amount of the budget. So they have the ability to go up or down within certain parameters. So they can't exceed by 10%. They can drop it as necessary. But mainly their function is to ensure that there is enough funding for the students' education and for the operation of the buildings and for the staff.
Okay. One more question I had. Aside from the obvious of COVID, and you have kids in the school district right now, so do I. What do you see as the greatest challenge that's facing our schools right now, aside from COVID?
I think that the greatest challenge that the schools are facing is the achievements are going down. Mm-hmm. And for what reason, I don't have an answer. That's more of a board thing. But that's one of the biggest things that I see right now, and I think that there's an opportunity to improve that.
Okay, thanks.
Carol, please.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on what you just said. It's something I've struggled with, and I'm sure other people do. When you say achievements are going down, what metrics do you use to determine that?
I use state data. There's a million places to look at, but I usually look at the state data because that's going to be comprised of all districts, and it gives me a level playing field.
All right, but maybe I didn't explain my question well enough. I'm asking, are you looking at standardized testing, or are you looking at graduation rates, or are you looking at grade progression? You know, what specific things?
All of the above. So the first thing that stands out to me is graduation rate, which is comprised of a number of different things, as is standardized testing. Mm-hmm. So those are the two main ones. I haven't paid too much attention to grade progression because I think those two kind of feed into it.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Mackenzie.
Thank you so much, Scott, for taking the time to be here this evening. On here, you do list that you are passionate for improving our children's education. How do you see the work that we do on this? What do you envision to improve the education here in town?
Well, while my vision would be more on the board side of things, where I can see that there's an opportunity is with more of a vocational type of programs. So enhancing what we have. There are programs that I feel lack. My children have participated in a couple of them that I feel that with better funding or more resources, they can do a better job and potentially even increase enrollment in those. So that's just one particular area right there. But we also have to find a way, and again, this is board stuff, not committee stuff. We have to find a way to make sure that the students, as standardized test scores are currently sit and graduation rates, that the students, we pay attention to that and do something to improve that. And that's all part of it. And maybe the vocational programs, which a lot of students, particularly young males, that they enjoy those vocational type of programs. If we were able to enhance those in any way, shape, form, or fashion, I think that could be a game changer.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Adler.
Thank you.
And our next candidate is Shane Albuquerque.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Albuquerque.
How are you, Mr. Mower?
The very best, thank you.
Excellent. I'm Shane Albuquerque. I am a resident of Merrimack almost my whole life. Was born here, went to school here, left for college. Sorry? Yep. Left for college. There we go. And came back. I love the town. I like the people. I might be the most underqualified candidate as far as knowing the education and the stats and what we've been doing wrong, these Facebook advocacy groups. I don't even have Facebook. So I'm probably out in my own little world. I live in Bean Road. I live in like the middle of the woods. So I come out, I talk, and then I go back. I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. The 4-year-old's almost 5, so he'll be starting kindergarten soon. I was involved actually with the fight with my mother and my neighbors. I should say fight. They involved us to get kindergarten free. So we were I don't know what we were doing, handing stuff out or going door to door or something. We had a whole advocacy group, I guess, when I was really young. But I am, I've been in business for a while. I have a business degree, focused in entrepreneurship and leadership. I've been an outside salesman in the electrical industry for the last 12 years. I do have a fairly good size. I wouldn't call it a budget, but I guess I need to have a budget as a sales guy to be able to make my numbers. So I guess the thing that I'd like to bring to the budget committee is understanding and maybe the balance between education and budget. Everybody wants everything we can get for the kids. I think that's pretty clear, right? I don't think anybody wants to take anything from the kids, but obviously there's a balance. And I don't know, I see myself as a realist, and I hope to be able to kind of maybe bridge some gaps. Maybe I'm optimistic, but I'd like to try. Any questions?
Go ahead, Jenna.
Hi there.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. I'm Jenna. I was going to ask the same question to every candidate, but you answered my question already, which is how long you've lived here, and what your involvement is, which you said is as nothing yet because your kids are so young. My question, so then I'm going to change my question for you. You said you graduated college and then you decided to move back to Merrimack. I'd love to understand why that was.
Growing up, I don't know if anybody grew up in this town or a town. Yes. So when you're growing up, you're like, we got to get out of here, right? This is horrible. This is like we're in the middle of nowhere. So I went down to Boston. I lived there for a while. I went to Florida. I went to a lot of really cool places. I lived in Miami for a bit, and yeah, it's all cool. But I said to myself, where do I want to bring up my kids? That was the ultimate question, and this was the answer. My wife, she was on South Beach when I met her. I brought her back up here to Merrimack, and she absolutely loves it. So I was a little worried, but good decision.
I like that story because I did the same thing. I moved away and I came back here because I wanted to raise my kids here.
You realize it was good all along.
Yeah, and I got a kid who started in kindergarten who's graduating this year, so it's a good ride.
That's awesome.
Good choice you made.
I'm sorry, I have to apologize. I'm somewhat remiss in full disclosure. Shane was a candidate to fill the vacant appointment last year. We had one open seat, and Shane did not prevail in the appointment last year, but he said he wanted to come back and give it another shot. Any other questions? Lori?
So Shane, I'm glad that Mr. Mower brought this up because I was going to ask you, since you interviewed in January for that open slot on the Budget Committee till now, have you spent time examining the public documents on the budget and looked at it, the different details, the different categories, things like that, and try to familiarize yourself with the budget?
So to be candid, when I left here last time, my mission was to run in, I think, April. You guys were like, hey, run in April. So when I left here, I read a bunch of documents as much as I could. I got that packet, the 39 pages. I read through that. And I was like, all right, we're going to get ready. And it's funny you say that. I actually brought it on vacation in March. The week I came back was when COVID started, and I stopped. I didn't look at it once. Chuck, I've been talking to Chuck off and on, and I knew this was coming up. I said, can I jump in again? He goes, yeah, absolutely, give it a shot. But to be candid, I'm not caught up. I will say I'm a fast learner, and I won't let you guys down.
Carol?
Yeah, this is a hard one probably for you to answer, but give it your best shot. There's obviously a tension between giving our students the best education we possibly can versus also being constantly aware of the impact on the taxpayer. And that tension has been growing, at least in part, because as our population gets older, we have more retirees who are on fixed incomes, et cetera, so it becomes a more difficult task for them. How would you envision trying to do a balancing act between trying to keep taxes as affordable as possible? I know they're never considered affordable, but as affordable as possible while still maintaining high-quality education for the students.
I guess I always like to use the term, anything I do in life is the juice worth the squeeze. I say it for everything. And I just, I know there's typically a handful of big decisions, and it's all right, which one do we do? Where do we throw the money? And I'm not like a big Venn diagram guy, but I'm a pros and cons guy, and let's list them out. Let's figure out what makes sense, and there's got to be a weak point, and we'll cut there. If there's 3 options, there's obviously a weak one, and then we talk about the other 2. I pay a lot of taxes just like everybody else, so I get that. You know what I mean? But at the same time, our kids are going to be our future. So I see myself as right in the middle on the whole thing.
Okay. And then one other question. This has only happened on rare occasions, but there have been a few times in the history of the Budget Committee where rather than decreasing the budget, we've actually added something to the budget that after doing our liaison interviews, which I don't know how familiar you are with what we do with that, but where something is brought to our attention during one of our liaison appointments that says, oh, there's not enough money for this, or this was totally overlooked, and we've thrown things into the budget. Some people believe that is part of the Budget Committee's mandate to either add or decrease to the budget. Other people believe our sole purpose is to either keep it where it's proposed by the school board or to decrease it. What's your philosophy on that?
I think the Budget Committee is there to strike a balance between education and budget. If it needs to be increased for a viable reason that's going to add value, then absolutely. If it's going to be, if it needs to be decreased and we can pull away because something doesn't need to be done, let's do it. It just, whatever makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
And I'd like to use one example. I'm an HDTV addict, and they renovate their homes, and they say, all right, your home's worth $100,000. You put $10,000 into it, now it's worth $140,000. Well, that's a good investment. Yeah, nobody wants to spend the $10,000. I get it, but if you're going to get $40,000 out of it, it makes sense. And obviously that's a little different than what we do here, but.
Andy.
Okay, so I'm going to ask my canned question, but I'll give you a little context because you don't have as much as Scott does experience in this. So given that the Budget Committee really worries about the budget that is proposed and then debates and discusses what the school board has done, how do you see the Budget Committee maybe getting more involved in the process with the school board through the year?
Well, I love the liaison part of it. And I don't know if there's an official, hey, here's our liaison for this, here's our liaison for this, but expanding that, I think it'd be a good thing. I don't know how many people we're talking to or in what groups, but certainly getting students and other people involved and just getting the community together and figuring it out. I mean, again, I just see it as a balance. I hope I'm answering that question correctly.
There's no right answer. I mean, just for context, the school board and the Budget Committee are 2 completely
correct
autonomous functions. So the Budget Committee doesn't serve at the pleasure of the school board and vice versa.
Yep.
But they have to work collaboratively because the school board expends the money and usually comes up with the original budget, and the Budget Committee has to understand what the budget is, right? So usually everything is all at the end of the year, and I always look for creative ways on how Budget Committee members think that they could be involved differently from the way things are currently done. So
I guess I don't know enough about the process now to know the answer to that, to be honest with you, Andy.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But I'm asking the same question of everybody. So
no, yeah,
Point,
absolutely.
right?
I'm going to answer them honestly, even if it's a bad answer.
Sure.
Any other questions? Yes, Lee.
Thank you for coming out this evening. I'd like to hear a little bit more about your business degree that you mentioned. If you wouldn't mind giving us a little more detail about that, please.
No, not at all. Wayne Huizinga actually is Nova Southeastern University, Wayne Huizinga School of Business is where I went. And I went there. It's in South Florida. It's in Davie, right outside of Fort Lauderdale, because they have certain requirements for their teachers that they have to have a business, fail, and restart a business in order to be a professor, which was one of the only schools that I had seen. And it was one of the best programs I've ever been involved in. And there was a leadership point to it that you had to be invited into, which I was and succeeded at. And I think it was a great experience.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Albuquerque? Seeing none, thank you very much, Shane.
Thank you.
So our next candidate is Robbie Reisman. Welcome, Robbie.
Hi.
If you'd just give us a brief overview of your interest in the Budget Committee and what you think you can bring to it.
Hey, hi. I'm Robbie Reisman. I have been a Merrimack resident now for about 17 years. I have a daughter who is in the school system. She is just going to be starting at JMUS this year, and also a taxpayer and homeowner. So I understand the importance of all different sides of the equation here. I've worked in the mental health field now for about 15 years, so it's a little bit different from your typical experience, maybe unorthodox, but I believe in the importance of the social emotional component of the school system, and strongly believe in public schools, healthy public schools, and I bring a newness, an open-mindedness, and a willingness to learn, and also I have worked in a team environment for much of my time for the past 15 years, and believe that at least has helped prepare me to be able to work collaboratively with the committee.
Questions from the board? Lori.
So I'll ask you the same question I asked Shane. Since you decided to run for Budget Committee back in February, March time period, and we had the Merrimack longest campaign waiting for July to roll around, what have you done to examine the public documents about the budget and getting familiarized with the different categories, the different things involved, the different ideas of the way budgets are run and those kinds of things, since it's kind of out of your wheelhouse?
Okay. Yeah, it's a good question. So I did, in particularly during the campaign time, I read and reread a bunch of the documents on the SAU website. I took some printouts. Again, I will not even pretend to be an expert on it, but I tried to familiarize myself as best I could, sort of being my solo pilot and trying to read it without sort of the context of other people's input. But I definitely will not pretend to be an expert, but I certainly have tried to learn as best I can.
Carol, please.
In regards to, you stated in your intro about your interest in the social emotional aspect of education. And I wonder if you could expound a little bit on that, in the sense of there's a fine line between the district should encourage the social emotional well-being of our students, but on the other hand, unless it's a case of like a special education IEP or something like that, but outside of that realm, we can't be diagnosing mental conditions in the broader student population. So where do you draw that line, and why?
Correct, because it has to be, people who are either licensed or accredited in a particular field. Otherwise, you would be violating a code of ethics to be making diagnoses or prescribing treatment. I think there are curricula, that are out there that encourage social emotional growth without necessarily focusing on, DSM-5 diagnoses and treatments. And I think the schools are often a touch point for society in which teachers notice things. I know with COVID, there's been some difficulties in terms of mental health for clients, for students and families. So, certainly keep an eye out, but you're correct. You can't go beyond what your certifications are, and schools are not explicitly designed for that purpose.
Is there anything that comes to the top of your mind that you've observed within the school district where you think maybe we could improve on what we're doing to address social emotional issues within our population?
Honestly, I can say that just with my experience at Thornton's Ferry, I felt like they did an excellent job. No, I didn't really have any critiques. No, I just support what they did.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Sure.
Jenna, please.
Hi.
I'm so awesome at this microphone stuff. Okay. Hi.
Hi.
My question is the same for you as it was for the other two. I just want to know, how long have you lived in Merrimack?
Not quite 17 years. 17 years this coming December.
Okay. And then, other than, I know you said your daughter's in school here, are there other ways that you are involved within the school district outside of attending school board meetings or budget committee meetings?
Well, outside of attending my daughter's school events, I have not had much involvement. And part of the reason I'm doing this now, as opposed to earlier in time, is I worked a pretty intensive job with a lot of on-call hours after work, so not really any traditional hours prior to about a year ago. And switching about a year ago, I all of a sudden have free time, which is not something I've been used to. So I'm figuring out what to do with it, and I thought this would be a constructive thing to do. You make me part of the community and part of my daughter's, education.
Thanks.
Any other members?
Gillian?
Andy?
Okay, you ready for my question? With the relationship between the school board and the budget committee, do you see an opportunity for evolution, change, something you'd like to see occur differently?
Getting deja vu with the question. So I will say that similar to Shane, I can't say that I'm an expert enough to be able to give a definitive answer on that. I can say that I have an open mind to, the more I learn, I figure I might be able to develop ideas more at that point, or at least talk to folks about it. But, I'd always hope for a very a collaborative relationship in the sense that, working together towards a common purpose.
Gillian, please.
Hey, Rob.
Hi.
I got your name right. So you mentioned earlier your background is in mental health and not necessarily finance.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like this committee, I'm sure all of you interviewing understand that, we look at the budget and everything else. Do you feel like your background in mental health gives you a different socioeconomic perspective than, say, somebody else?
I can't necessarily speak for anybody else who is, applying for the position here, but I definitely have a perspective that's definitely been colored by my experience working with, mostly folks, indigent folks with severe mental illness. So I definitely have a high appreciation for that, which is why, I can understand as well the, financial difficulties people may experience just due to taxes and housing costs and just rising costs in general, but also understand the importance, again, of education. It's paramount.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Robbie.
Thank you.
And next we have Scott Sabins.
Pardon me, Chuck. Before we continue, I'd ask that we all continue to maintain wearing our masks, please. There's at least one person out there that is not wearing the mask appropriately. Please continue to wear the mask in respect with everybody else in the room, please. Okay, then maybe you should leave and watch this at a different time. I think it's disrespectful if you are not wearing your mask to everybody else in the room, please. Then maybe you shouldn't be in the room.
Thank you for coping as best as possible. Mr. Sabins, welcome.
Thank you. Am I close enough? All So my name is Scott Sabins. I live at 8 Dumas Lane.
I'm sorry, can't quite hear you.
No. Move this a little bit forward. So Scott Sabins. I live at 8 Dumas Lane. I have 2 children in the school district, one going into 4th and one going into 8th grade. I've lived in Merrimack for 16 years, and we moved here because of the schools at the time. And let's see, I work in town. I'm an IT security professional, very detail-oriented analyst. I lead a small team. I basically looked at the budget committee as a way to start contributing to the community. It's something that I felt that I should do. You know, I pay my taxes here. I figured I'd get involved somehow, and this would be a good way to do it. My wife and I both work full-time, so being able to get in and be heavily involved with school on a day-to-day basis is not something that either of us are able to do, so this would be my intro into that. So qualification-wise, again, one of the things I pride myself on at work every day is finding efficiencies. And as Mr. Albuquerque had said, it's the weighing the risk versus reward or cost versus benefit. And that's just something that I do every day, and figured I could bring that to this committee with a level head and ready to listen and also contribute to the conversation. I think that we'll go with that. And what are your questions?
Oh, very well. Questions from the board? Lori.
Kind of like Andy, same question. Since you decided to run in this past election, what have you done to familiarize yourself with the way the budget committee works, functions, and looking at the public documents on the budget?
So to be honest, after the election, I did nothing. That was such a long election. I took a break beforehand. My wife and I actually sat down and we looked at the budget, compared it to the other towns, and tried to categorize everything, tried to make sense of how everything works, so that were I to be elected, I'd be able to hit the ground running and understand what these categories meant. There's still some questions, but I think having that knowledge up front would be helpful on this board, on the committee.
Carol, please.
Yeah, one of the things you mentioned was an interest in finding efficiencies. If you can think back to when you were looking through our budget, can you give me one example of something where you think we might have room to improve in efficiency?
So there was one line item that I don't understand, and I can't remember exactly what it was called, but it was additional support staff. Compared to the other towns, Merrimack's support staff, I can't remember the exact name of the line item, was really, really high. And that's just something that I'd want to understand exactly what's covered in that section and why is Merrimack so much higher than the other towns. And very well could be a valid reason. It's just something that I had picked out. Mm-hmm.
Jenna.
Hi, Scott.
Hi.
So you already answered my questions. You lived here 16 years, and you said you work full-time, and it doesn't give you a lot of chance to be involved. So I'm going to do what I did with Shane and ask. I'm going to make a statement first and then ask a question. First of all, on Election Day, you were the only one of the candidates that stopped to talk to my daughter, who was out at the polls. She came home, and I can't tell you what that meant to her. So I just want to commend you. I think that says a lot about who you are, that you acknowledged a 14-year-old girl as a human person and how awkward it was for her to be out there campaigning for her mom. And so I just wanted to say publicly how much I appreciated that, and that I think that really says a lot about who you are.
Thank you.
You just said that you moved here to Merrimack for the schools at the time, which leads me to believe your opinion has maybe changed a little bit or evolved. Could you explain that a little bit?
So when we moved, we were looking at the towns in the budget range that we could afford, and we were looking at school rankings. I forget the name of the website, but there was a website that would go through and it would show you like crime rate in schools, and Merrimack was ranked pretty well on that site. And through this election process, what I had learned is the ranking didn't seem as high as it used to be, but it could be it's a different data point. The website was like neighborhoods or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was, but so that's why we had moved here, and we hadn't started our family yet at that point. But now it seems like over the past, say even just like the past 6 years since I've moved, I think my taxes have increased. Everybody's taxes have increased by 10-12% overall, and that number doesn't seem to be moving along with it. So I'd like to see if there's a way to, either keep the spending the same, or if we're bringing it up, that the ranking also follows.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Dave.
Would you move here today? So you said to that point.
Sorry, I can't hear you very well.
16 years ago, you
Yep.
moved here because of the school rankings at the time. So school rankings today, would you still recommend moving to Merrimack?
I think so. It's a great town.
And now that you have kids in the program too. Now that you have kids in the school?
Yeah, I would still move to Merrimack. I would still recommend people move here. Yeah.
Andy.
Okay. I'll be like, where they restate the question? That's like on Family Feud. I'll restate the question. How do you see the relationship between the school board and the budget committee? Do you see any changes that you'd like to see, or any improvements or differences?
Yeah. So originally my idea was that the budget committee was kind of an oversight to the just the bottom line, the numbers. I would like to see the budget committee be able to work in a partnership with the school board to have that back and forth dialogue, and maybe be a part of the recommendations on how some of that money is spent.
Any other questions? Carol?
I don't know if you'll know the answer to this, but have you ever done any analysis of what percentage your property taxes has gone up versus how much the different budgets have gone up, so that you could kind of see, okay, inflation is causing property taxes to go up X percent, and is either the school or the town disproportionately contributing to that increase?
Yeah, well, that's there, right? That's in the back of my head, obviously, that there's inflation, there's just property value increases in the town, which is great. But the majority of our tax dollars are from the school budget.
Yes, but I'm just saying, as a percentage increase year after year, do you see a connection between your increase in property taxes and the increase in the school district budget, or do you see it out of balance in some way?
I'm not sure I.
All right, let me try restating it.
All right.
All right, I'll make up some numbers. If your property taxes went up 4% last year, and if, these are totally numbers off the top of my head, don't anybody take it as me stating any facts. If the school district's budget also went up 4% last year, would you consider that to be fair? Versus if the school district's budget went up 6%, would you consider that exorbitant? And on the other hand, if they only went up 2%, would you be wondering what's going on?
No, I wouldn't look at it that way. I would look at how and why the budget went up. Where did that money go? If it was going to standard salary increases, that might be something, but if it was going to something else, I would want to know where it came from.
All right. I have some follow-on thoughts, but I'm not going to pursue them tonight. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Saban.
Thank you.
Brian Stisser, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Brian Stisser of 56 Middlesex Road.
not to steal Jenna's thunder, but I moved to Merrimack about 5 years ago. My wife and I chose to buy our first home here after relocating to New Hampshire after leaving the Marine Corps. We have a 5-year-old son who will be entering Reed's Ferry in next month, assuming that there is any actual entry to the school. Professionally, I sell enterprise software for anybody who it means anything to, enterprise resource planning, basically glorified accounting software. In that role, I work with chief financial officers, chief executive officers, chief operating officers, and corporate controllers on evaluating generally one of the largest purchases that an organization will make in any given year, right around 5% of their top line revenue. And that's not their budget, that's their top line revenue, about 5% that goes into that purchase. So a lot of working with finance people in that role. I actually just finished my MBA from UNH this last year with a specialization in information systems and business analytics. So very much a technology focus. I previously was on the budget committee for 2 years. I did not seek re-election in the spring because as I was completing my degree, I was looking at the possibility that I may need to relocate and didn't believe it would be appropriate for me to seek re-election knowing that there was a very real chance that I may need to move for work. So made the decision at that time that it would be inappropriate for me to seek re-election. But seeing as there were vacancies and as of Friday morning, the central office hadn't received any letters, I went ahead and submitted a letter to be considered for one of these vacancies.
Questions from the board? Andy.
I'll start instead of waiting till last. I actually have 2 questions. The first one is the canned question, which is, you've been on the budget committee before. How do you see the relationship between the school board and the budget committee evolving or changing, or does it stay the same?
So from a purely who has what authority standpoint, as we both know, the budget committee has very, very limited authority. So the primary function that the budget committee serves is essentially a review and oversight function, and any ability to change things is really based on the ability to cooperate, collaborate with, and influence members of the school board. Because even if the budget committee changes the bottom line number, and you and I discussed this regarding the warrant article for the demolition of the Brentwood building, that even if that warrant article had passed, the school board could have simply chosen not to spend the money. So for the budget committee to effect that policy change, the only way for the budget committee to actually do that is by relationships and influence and not through any type of formal authority.
Okay. The second question is, it gets to the point of when you were going for your degree and then considering moving. I know, having been part of the last process, that there were a lot of meetings you weren't able to be at near the end, and then your decision to go. And now you're in town and you're asking to commit for another year. How do you see your commitment being for this coming budget season? Because to quote some other people, I think it's going to be really important what we do this year. So.
Yep. So I did unfortunately miss a number of sessions in the beginning of the year. I had a night class that was a required class for my degree. And that was, I think it was Tuesday night, so it conflicted with the budget committee, and there were several scheduling changes that happened. All of those were coordinated with the chairman in advance. But this year, I don't have that type of commitment, so barring any one-off work travel, which doesn't seem likely to be an issue at this time, I actually don't see anything that I would expect to preclude me attending any meetings.
Okay, thanks.
Lori.
What do you see as the biggest challenge that the school district and the budget committee are facing this year as opposed to the previous 2 years that you served?
So, I think that the biggest challenge is pretty clearly the pandemic situation and everything that entails, from the shift to remote learning, the need to try to have multiple contingency plans for hybrid versus fully remote versus when can we actually have kids back in the class full time, And all of that is incredibly resource intensive, not only on the budget, but also on teacher time and how to balance the many competing priorities there of health and safety versus educational achievement versus other services that are provided through the school district, because there's a lot of different priorities pulling in completely different directions. And that is, I think, far and away the largest challenge facing the entire school district and everybody associated with it.
Jenna, please.
Hi, Brian. So you said 5 years. I'm just going to ask you the same question I asked everybody else. Outside of school board meetings and obviously your service on the budget committee, which we appreciate, and what other ways have you been involved in the school community?
So as I mentioned, I have a 5-year-old, so he hasn't entered the school system yet. So in terms of the parent association, I haven't been involved in that and not involved in the school community so much because of the fact my child hasn't entered school yet. However, I first got involved with the schools in campaigning for the passage of full-day kindergarten. So what was that, 4 years ago? So not too long after moving to town, when that issue came up. That was actually my first entree into being involved.
Thanks. Thank you.
Dan.
As a former member of this committee, what did you learn during your time here, and what surprised you?
So I think one thing that is very easy to miss is just how little of the school district's budget truly is discretionary, and how much of it is truly driven by federal mandates, state mandates, health insurance costs, that's the single largest item, and the most variable item. So just how much of the budget truly, there's very little that the district can do within the law to affect such a substantial portion of the budget. Another thing that I did learn through being involved over the last few years has been there's always, and I'm a sales guy, so I'm always looking at, what's the long-term value, what's the total value versus the total price, right? And with many of the items that there is some discretion, for example, with the roof replacements that have been an item over the last few years for the different schools, there is some discretion on when you replace those roofs, but if you defer that maintenance, then you can incur extra costs in doing so. And one of the things that the Merrimack School District, between the administration, the board, and the budget committee, has been very good at over the years, with a few minor exceptions, has been going ahead and biting the bullet and doing that maintenance when it makes sense versus trying to push it out, and making sure that we're not racking up essentially debt to ourselves by not doing maintenance when it makes sense, not making the right investments when the investment is smaller versus waiting until we have to spend the money and the cost has grown.
What surprises did you find?
I think because I had gotten involved the year before I was elected to the committee, that I was somewhat prepared for coming into the committee. I think in first getting involved, one of the things that I was pleasantly surprised by was the level to which everyone involved, both on the budget committee and on the school board, is very devoted to maintaining the dual mandate of the Merrimack School District of ensuring the best quality education available for our children while also looking out for the taxpayer, and that there is that dual mandate and that those considerations have to be balanced. And in sitting in on meetings, particularly hearing, is this something that we can justify to the taxpayer? And is this something that if we don't do it, are we really doing what's right for the kids? And the extent to which everybody is very studious in maintaining that balance.
Yes, Carol.
Well, Dan stole one of my questions, so I'll skip over that one. He's a mind reader, what can I say? Did I understand correctly that at one time you thought you might have to move out of Merrimack, but now you pretty much think you're staying?
Correct. So I did an MBA last year, an accelerated MBA. I graduated in May. And as I was preparing to graduate from the degree, so during the filing period for the previous election, at that time I was actively job seeking for post-graduation. And as I was job seeking, I work in technology. Actually, my wife works in technology as well. So the majority of the jobs for us are located in the Boston area. And so we were looking at if we were both going to be commuting, an hour each way in the same direction every day, whether it was really tenable for us to make that commute every day. Fortunately, I ended up with a role where I actually work full-time remote, so that is no longer a concern, and I don't anticipate changing that role anytime soon.
Okay. And then my other question is, you're probably aware of this, which probably a lot of members of the public are not, but Merrimack is getting very close to where we should be debt-free. Do you have any thoughts on when that time comes as to whether that decrease in expenditures should be totally applied to reducing taxes, or whether you see any services that we're lacking that should be added? Any thoughts at all on that whole process?
So I think that is a little bit of a challenging question to answer right at this moment, because there's a lot of factors that go into it. As was previously mentioned, we are going into an economic downturn. So having that extra breathing room in the budget may be very good, depending on how long that downturn lasts, right? Because it's what, I believe 2 years before we're debt-free? Is that correct?
I think it's even longer than that.
Okay. But it's not going to be next year.
Right.
We're not talking about it this budget cycle. So
right.
By the time that the district is debt-free, we may be on the upswing again in the economic cycle. So that would really impact the decision. On the other hand, interest rates are as low as they ever have been and likely as low as they ever will be. So if there are investments that we would like to make as a district and as a town, this is an opportune time to do that because the cost of finance is a lot lower. I personally do not like the idea of taking on debt just because we can, just because the debt is gone so we can take on a new bond.
Right.
If there is a specific need that makes sense. So previously the turf field was considered as a item that had some substantial need within the district, and I think at that time it may make sense to revisit the turf field and whether financing a turf field would make sense once the other bonds are paid off. So the shortest answer I can give to that question, I think, would be I wouldn't advocate that we should take on debt because we can, but when the current bonds are paid off, if there are investments that make sense and interest rates are still as low as they are, then I would be in favor of taking advantage of that situation to make those investments.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes, Lori.
I'm going to ask a similar question that Mr. Coakley had asked Mr. Adler. A number of your social media posts were very, and I can understand why, emotional or slightly aggressive to a number of candidates who ran for office this past spring. Do you have any regrets for any of those posts that were particularly aggressive towards the candidates?
I'm sorry,
and
could you
how would
highlight-
that affect your involvement in the committee?
I'm sorry, could you highlight any post that was aggressive?
Well, particularly you called me out saying I was against special education, which I've specifically said I have never once been against special education.
Okay, I do not remember writing that. Was I referencing a specific statement?
You referenced a group of people and tagged me in it.
Okay. So was it that the group as a whole had targeted special education funding?
The people you listed in the group had never targeted special education.
Okay. If that was a factual inaccuracy, I'm sorry. I don't know the specific post that you're referring to. So if I made a factually inaccurate statement, I'm sorry for that.
I appreciate that. I just am asking in terms of if we're all different people, we all have different thoughts and philosophies. How is that going to affect the team dynamic of the budget committee?
So First of all, as I said, I don't remember writing anything that was aggressive. I try not to make statements that are aggressive, maybe forceful, in making a point. I harbor no ill will against any individual, including yourself. I do believe very, very strongly that the appropriate investment in our public schools is vitally important. And to the extent that that is a shared goal, to ensure that we are having the proper investment in our public schools, to ensure that they are able to thrive and continue to fulfill their purpose, then I am ready to work with whoever else shares that goal. And if someone has a goal which runs contrary to that, then I will forcefully argue for the interest of funding our public schools.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Stisser.
Thank you.
And now we come to our final candidate.
The best is always last.
With a name like Wilson, Ellen Wilson.
I've been using that joke
I'm
for
sure you're
48
standing
years.
at the end of the line most of the times when it's alphabetical.
I did. I am married, and I did have a chance to be a G, but I kept the W.
Well, welcome.
So, I'm Ellen Wilson. I've been a business owner in town with my husband for 21 years. So we've also paid commercial property taxes for many, many years. We've lived directly in town since 2013, and we are a homeowner. We also have 3 children in the district, ages 16, 14, and 4. She'll soon be 5, entering in. We have been involved with the school system prior to having children, actually prior to living in Merrimack. My husband was involved in the Rotary Club, with Interact, with First Robotics, with the hockey team. We've been very involved. We actually first moved here. I'm from the Midwest. He's from Canada. We threw a dart at a map, no lie. It landed in the Northwest and the Northeast, and I told him to find a job because anybody will hire me. I'm a surgical assistant. I do not have any business degree like people have spoken about. However, I have sat on many, many peer-elected committees to balance budgets within the healthcare system, including academic tertiary system operating rooms from, the size of 19 ORs to 28 ORs. So I have been that peer person, and I've given fresh eyes. Anyhow, we threw a dart at a map, and I told him to find a job. We first moved to Nashua. He worked for another chiropractor in Nashua, and then we decided, hey, we really like New Hampshire. We want to live here. So we started to look around at communities. And he went to a Rotary meeting in this town, and he met a few people. We got involved with the Lioness Club and started to support them. And then he said, you know what, let's open up an office there. And I said, sure, no problem, because we just kind of fell in love with Merrimack. Unfortunately, it took us until 2013 to be able to move here, but it didn't stop us from being involved. We've been involved with the MYA, things like that. He sat on committees. I've been on committees. I'm also the PTG president because once my children were in the school system, I wanted to become more involved in the school. So I'm used to this. That's why I wore a tank top today. It was either that or scrubs, and I didn't want to scare everybody in my scrubs, so I wore this, knowing that it was hot. I've been the PTG president at the middle school for 5 years. I've gotten to know the school system, how it works, how budgets work within the school system. I got a checkoff list here. Let me make sure I covered everything. I bring the ability to look at different budgets with different eyes. So in my career, I always have to adjust, and I always have to look at the situation around me. So there's never anything cut and dry, and that's the way I always approach budgets. I approach it that way with our personal budget, our business budget, and any budget I've ever looked at, because what can change? In 2008, I took a position as a private assistant for 2 surgeons that owned a very busy plastic surgery practice. This is a smaller budget compared to a school budget of millions, but I cut their personal office budget the first year $300,000, and they were shocked. But I made them more money, too. So that's what I'm saying, that I can look at different things and balance it. I also was peer elected because I listened to the people around me. I did run for the election. However, I was not as active as some of the other candidates because of COVID. My job started to ramp up when the election started to ramp up. Poor Juanita, she called me a million times, tried to interview me, but I said, unless you can interview me at 5 a.m., I can't make it. And I felt that it was getting a little heated for the wrong reasons. So me being me and giving 100% to what I do every single day, I backed down, I paid attention, and I decided, you know what, I'll just come for the appointment if I don't get enough votes to win. I decided to run because I had maybe about 25 people approach me, both friends and acquaintances and people I didn't even know, saying, we like your energy, we like who you are, we like how you're involved in the community, and we know that you'll listen and have the best interest of the community, of us, of our students. Because basically, I'm that foundation person on any task I undertake. You can't build a skyscraper starting on the 14th floor, so you have to have a foundation of integrity, conscience, and being able to look at everything involved subjectively, and I'm that person.
Questions from the board? Lori?
In your experience on being on those different kinds of budgets for ORs and your plastic surgeons and things, have you ever had to make an unpopular decision to reduce something that others may have wanted, but you saw the end benefit in those reductions?
Yes, at the University of Iowa, I was there for 7 years. I was actually recruited by them a year after I graduated from surgical assisting. We had to completely reorganize the OR and go from a nursing versus technical budget that was 70% nursing, 30% technical, and balance that at 60-40. So unfortunately, positions did have to be cut, salaries had to be adjusted, hours had to be changed, benefits had to be looked at again. And I was very honored, actually, that they voted me in when the supervisor came to me and said, we asked in the group meetings and your name had the most votes. I was like, sure. And that's actually when I started to learn the most about budgets, and that was back in 1994. And I can calculate your blood volume like that in a surgery. But when it comes to that, I tend to take things apart and really look at it, which I started to do when I decided to get involved. And I was like, I'm just going to pull it back a little bit and wait. If I get on the committee, then I'll take it apart pieces by pieces and I'll really focus. So I've had to make those decisions.
Carol, please.
Would you anticipate, and I know this is a guess at this point, but being in the nursing profession, would you anticipate if COVID goes on for some prolonged period of time that your possible exposure could prove problematic to participating on the budget committee?
I've scrubbed a TB positive patient and survived. I did transplant for 8 years, and I've been exposed to much. I'm very confident with my skills and my universal precautions. Actually, my confidence is probably my biggest downfall because it can be intimidating to people. But no, it doesn't. I have 3 kids. They play hockey, they do competitive dance, they do all kinds of sports. I run a business. I do all the books for my husband. I am an independent contractor and literally contract with 3 different doctors, a couple different facilities. I still make time for everything, and I balance my time budget very well. So I would take you into consideration if I was exposed or high risk at that time, because right now we have all sorts of things implemented. My travel is restricted more than anybody else's travel is restricted. If we go outside of Maine, Vermont, or New Hampshire, including to Massachusetts, for more than X amount of days, which is 2 days to Massachusetts, you're allowed, we have to quarantine for 3 weeks. So it wouldn't interfere, but it definitely would come into play that I would be conscientious of you and other members and make sure that I was doing what I should do as a responsible citizen and healthcare professional.
Okay, and I guess it's both to your advantage and your disadvantage, but I guess I'm approaching your candidacy slightly differently because I'm taking into account your experience in the healthcare field.
Mm-hmm.
What would you anticipate would be the types of budgetary impacts on the school district as a result of COVID? We don't know how long it will last, but what types of budgetary impacts would you anticipate,
Well,
and how would you address them?
COVID has brought uncertainty, and you have to watch it all play out and adapt, like I adapt to any situation throughout the day, and including surgery or even with my kids. The economic impact is yet to be seen, but then there's a more important impact of the new educational standard norm. So what that brings to our students, are they going to be affected by lack of contact with their teachers, lack of contact with their social peers? That's obviously going to affect the budget because you're possibly going to need greater technology than just a few more Chromebooks than you had last year. You know, maybe more telecommunication ability so that teachers can teach remotely. You just don't know until the whole thing plays out. But that's what you're going to have to be able to adapt to. And then you have to adapt your budget to that if there's any restrictions or increases that need to occur in order to give everyone the best well-rounded experience in education and support the teachers in order to give them the ability to produce that.
Okay, thank you.
Mackenzie.
Hi, Ellen. So you've had 2 kids go through the school system here. Have you seen any improvements, or do you see anything that you would want improved? And how do you see that this committee would make an impact in that?
Things that I want to be improved. That's really hard because that's also subjective. So something I may want for my son may not be. So I don't know if that's the responsibility of the budget committee or if that's the responsibility of each individual family and student and then their education team. And then we support them by giving them the financial ability to afford to do what they need to do for those improvements. So right now, I don't have any improvements that I would make other than with the telecommunications and improving how we track our students and having them more accountable to their meetings every day. And I'm not sure the budget committee really affects that unless we need to increase a video system or something. That's kind of one of my biggest concerns going into a school year that's going to be partially remote, partially in school. Did I answer your question? And I want to say Sparkle Baby, right? I've been a dance mom for years. I've known Mackenzie, sorry. It's the pep squad leader in me from high school.
Jenna, please.
I'm just going to say that you fully answered my question, and I've seen you in action for so many years. You have been a huge contributor to the school district, and I'm super grateful that you covered it all, and I'm also just grateful for all that you've done.
Thank you.
Andy.
Okay, the last time I'll ask this question.
I'm ready for you. You don't even have to ask it.
Oh, okay, fine.
Communication is key to the success of any collaboration. And one of the other reasons I decided to join the committee and get a little further involved into the district is that when I watch what happens on social media, which I was a championship debater in high school and debated in college as well. So it's hard for me to do that on social media level because I'm more of a face-to-face person, but not just communication between the committees so that they can collaborate effectively and efficiently, but with the public. I know there's websites and I know you can do this and stuff, but I kind of made it my mission after January when I started paying attention after Mackenzie was on the budget committee. And I was like, hey, what do they do? What is she doing? As I started to educate the parents around me. So I took a little bit of time through my role with the PTG. I educated my entire board. I had them help educate other people. And I actually had parents come up to me at open house nights and stuff and said, we had no idea. And I'm like, you can't complain about your taxes, and you can't complain about your education when you're not informed and you don't effectively communicate. So.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I will declare the interview process closed. The 6 candidates that have come here this evening, I want to congratulate for taking the interest to come and reveal your ideas so willingly in a transparent, open process. And that we are all here for similar reasons, I'm sure, to safeguard the well-being of our school district and community. All 6 candidates now stand in nomination for 2 vacant positions, and I so declare it. Now, we come to the board deliberation. This is a time when we get to make our best supportive pitch for the candidates that we think are best. And when this round is finished, we will hold a vote. And it will proceed as a roll call vote. And you get to choose up to 2 candidates. Or you may abstain completely, or you may name only 1 candidate, but no more than 2. And that is how it will follow. So with that, I open board deliberation. If there's anybody that would like to speak in support of a candidate. Carol.
Yeah, I echo what Mr. Mower said of thank you to all the candidates who applied. All of you have something to offer, and so I don't want to discard anyone. However, we have to make a decision. In my mind, it comes down to the first of my 2 votes is going to go to Brian Stisser, largely based on the fact he has 2 years on the Budget Committee, so he will essentially be up to speed right from day one. So I think that was a given in my mind. My second vote is much more difficult for me to decide. And I think I made it during this interview process tonight that I think I am going to put my second vote to Ms. Wilson. I was very impressed by her statements about how she worked to educate other people within the district on how the budget process worked and how the school district worked. And I think that is an extremely important aspect to this whole process. So for that reason, I'm going to be supporting her for the second position.
Anyone else? Yes, Lee? Oh, excuse me, Gillian.
There we go. Yes, thank you to everyone who put in an application and got up and faced all of our questions tonight. Thank you. I'm going to support Brian, primarily based on the 2 years that I've worked with him on this budget committee. I have seen, we both came in at the same time with equal knowledge or lack of knowledge about how the committee worked, and I've watched him look at things in such a pragmatic way and not just, cut and dry, but asking lots of questions, digging deeper, and then being willing to change his mind based on new information. And I think that that's important. I think that we have to be open to learning how the committee works, how the laws work, how the schools work, because we all don't, except for Pat, possibly know every rule in detail. And we have to be open to learning that and if that affects our decisions and whatnot.
Any other deliberation? Yes, Lori.
I want to just say something in general related to our interview candidates tonight. And I want to thank you all for coming and being here tonight. The public at our last meeting and since has been very vocal about wanting to feel like they still have a say. And so the two that I will pick from will be from the four who ran for office. I think that it's legitimate, even though that's not part of our process, to consider what the public did vote in July and consider their voices as we represent the Budget Committee and represent the town of Merrimack. So as I listen to the deliberative talk and stuff like that, I'm going to hold off on the two that I'm going to pick because I want to hear other voices on our committee. But I am going to say that I believe we should take into consideration those who did show up, those who ran, those who had town people vote for them.
Yes, Jenna.
I also want to thank you all. I think this has been such an incredible year. I guess my understanding is the Budget Committee has often had vacant seats. And this year we had 10 candidates run for office and 6 come out for 2 positions. And so while I definitely, don't agree with everybody necessarily, I am grateful that there's people willing to step up. That's huge and important. And I know how vulnerable it makes you feel, having done it myself. So I'm grateful that you were here for that. I wish I had more than 2 votes, if we're being honest, because I'm kind of blown away, actually. I definitely don't think that one has to be an expert to be on this committee. I mean, I don't consider myself an expert. I consider myself an expert on the Merrimack School District, maybe, but not on, I don't have a business degree or anything. I'm just a mom. And so I think I thought I was going to do one thing tonight, but in the end, I think I'm going to make my decision based on my question, which is how involved are you? How knowledgeable are you about our school district, the way it works, the things that are involved in it, and how you really will fully understand the impacts of the decisions that we might have to make based on your involvement in this school district, which is hard for me because I have other people I might want to vote for other reasons. But I think that's the way that I'm going to make my decision.
Is there any other deliberation? Andy.
Sorry, my hand. 5-hour and 6-minute school board meeting last night. My arms aren't moving very much. So, just as a bit of background, I've spent 5 years on the Budget Committee back when it was first transposed after the Town Council was brought in, and then the School District Budget Committee sort of redid. So I was part of that at the beginning, and I've been on the school board for 9 years now, almost 9 years. And it's provided a really interesting perspective as to the dynamics between the school board and the Budget Committee, and how people work together, and more importantly, how the Budget Committee is many times viewed as a stepping stone or a launching pad, if you will, for people to get more involved in the schools in different parts of the town. So when I listened tonight, and I came with no preconceived notion, I listened to what people did. I've talked to some of the candidates before, and what I look for is someone who truly wants to understand the process, who's asking the right questions, but also has the betterment of the district in mind. So, and while I don't put a lot of credence, and I did make some comments last time about the election results, and do we weigh the election results in terms of what we pick, I find it interesting my thought process as to what the candidates are, who are on the ballot. So I'll throw out there that based on me, my personal belief right now is the two people that struck out to me that I would support is first Ellen, because of her spirit and her sort of enthusiasm, but secondly also Scott Sabins. Scott's questions that he's asked during the process and his sort of logic that he uses matches what I think a budget committee member needs to have. So from my perspective, those would be two members that I would support as part of this.
Any more deliberation? Yes, Mackenzie.
I would say that this evening, I ran for this role 3 years ago. This is my third year. And I came into this, and I honestly, the fact that I went through the K through 12 school system, I didn't know a lot about what this role was. I had talked to a few people who were on the school board at the time, and I knew I wanted to become more involved in this town, but I didn't know how. And through talking through people on the school board and, you know, the fact that I work in the education field now, this is certainly a huge passion of mine. I did not have the most easy time in K through 12 education, and I think as a young person, the most young person on this, I bring a fresh eye and a fresh new perspective to this. And as someone that, again, ran and I didn't know a lot about, you know, what this role was and how much they affected our children's education, I've learned a lot over these last 2 years and hope to learn a lot this third year. And so, you know, I've worked with a lot of people on this committee. In specific, I've also seen the work that Brian Stizzer has done. He's really evaluated things not only as to how this work will put a huge impact on our children's education, but also thinking about the taxpayers of this town as well. And I think, you know, he's brought a lot of experience. He's brought a lot of professionalism and integrity to this role, and I will be casting my vote for him. And, you know, I don't think it's all about the experience. I think sometimes we do need a fresh perspective and people that can look at things from a new perspective that sometimes those of us who have been involved and do know the work on this committee, we might not always think about that. And so I will also be casting my vote for, I believe it's Albuquerque. Is that how you say it? Perfect. And so those are the two people that I plan to vote for this evening.
Any other deliberation? Going once? Twice? Well, let me make my appeal to my fellow board members. I've lived in Merrimack a long time. I remember when I didn't know anything about the town of Merrimack. But I believed in participating. And I understood that it was a collaborative and that I would learn from some of the more seasoned individuals. And I learned a great deal from the unseasoned individuals as well. I know the town has eclipsed itself many times over, but I still believe that it is a community where people have a sense of place. I have a sense of place. And so I would like to encourage you to think about Shane Albuquerque. Shane grew up with my boys way back when, and I'm very impressed that Shane has come back to Merrimack because he recognizes the foundational qualities of this location and these people that call Merrimack home. He has purchased a home, pays property taxes, takes care of his ailing father, as a responsible son certainly should. He has a very prestigious job with a national electric supply company. He has a good education. more importantly, he's a homeboy with a sense of place. And I can see that someday, perhaps he'll be a town councilor. Perhaps he'll be a school board member. Perhaps many things. But it's important that old white men particularly give up the baton to the younger crowd, to the diversity of our younger crowd. And I think that Shane really performed well last year when he came before the board and was not appointed. I'm very happy to see him rekindle the interest in being appointed, and I hope you will consider the value of cultivating a whole new generational family that calls Merrimack home. My second candidate that I will be supporting is absolutely a superlative individual in Brian Stisser, with a performance that was well recognized on the Budget Committee, and we well deserve his expertise and his contributions. So there it lies. We all support people for different reasons, and I want you to know how much I support the idea of a homegrown community. So we will close deliberations, and I will ask if everyone has made up their mind relative to the votes they will cast. Is there anybody still in question? Then we will proceed with the roll call vote. Pat, would you please call the roll?
Vote for Ellen Wilson and Scott Sabins.
Mrs. Lang.
I vote for Ellen Wilson and Brian Stisser.
Mrs. Savage. Mrs. Savage.
I vote for Brian Stitzer and Mr. Albuquerque.
Mr. Coakley.
Brian Stisser and Miss Wilson.
Mr. Eelg.
Ellen Wilson and Brian Stisser.
Ms. Murphy.
Shane Albuquerque and Brian Stitzer.
Mr. Snyder.
Scott Sabins and Ellen Wilson.
Mrs. Peters.
Scott Sabins and Mrs. Wilson.
Mr. French.
Brian's sister and Shane Albuquerque.
Mrs. Hardy.
Brian Stisser and Ellen Wilson.
Mr. Mower.
Shane Albuquerque and Brian Stisser.
The results are as follows. Mr. Adler, 0. Mr. Albuquerque, 4. Mr. Reisman, 0. Mr. Sabins, 3. Mr. Stisser, 7. And Mrs. Wilson, 7. Mr. Stisser and Mrs. Wilson.
Mrs. Wilson and Mr. Stisser are are the nominees who have acquired the most number of votes, and I so declare the record. You may, this evening, speak to the school district clerk, Pat Heinrich, and she will swear you in, or you can make arrangements at some other time to be sworn in. Thank everybody for the process. The next meeting is to be announced. We have not yet confirmed the schedule. Things are a bit fluid with COVID and everything else going on. I suspect it will be approximately 6 weeks. And that will be a training session for the board members, so we can all apprise ourselves of the experts that will outline and frame what our responsibilities are, what our powers are, and what other options we have as elected officials. Yes, Carol?
Will that training session be considered an official board meeting, or will that be just an educational session for those that wish to attend?
That will be an educational session. Now, we come to public participation. Are there any comments from the public? Seeing none, I will close public participation, and I will ask for member comments. Are there any comments from the board members? Yes, Carol.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate both to the members of the committee and to the people who came out tonight, the people who applied for the positions, and those who just came out of a sense of community interest. This is always a difficult process when we have to choose one person over another. But I would like to encourage anyone who has any interest in serving on this or other boards and committees in town, don't give up, keep at it. Your input is welcome. And, presumably, if you didn't get selected tonight, you will find another position to contribute to the community in, and I hope you stick with it. Thank you.
Are there any other? Yes, Lori.
I just had a question about the training. Is that open to the public as well?
No, it's training for board members only.
Okay.
Any other comments? Would someone care to make a motion to adjourn? Carol makes a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second? Andy has a second. All vote in the affirmative by raising your right hand. And that is the end of our meeting. Thank you very much.